term that I proposed to speak about has a lot to do with what many others have proposed also today, and I guess it's quite natural that Ania was working in so-called non-Western or post-colonial context. They're going to be very concerned with archival methodologies and so on. And in Egypt, this has obviously taken on a much greater urgency, the idea of the archive, because of the ongoing conflict and loss of life. And since 2011, this archive fever that was already burning for some years got really, really extreme with so many new archival initiatives that we now have sort of progressed to archival chronic fatigue, I think. We're a bit bored with the whole topic, but at the same time, it's a very, very strange historical moment to experience, because you can be at the site of violence, for instance, and see something with your own eyes, see something happen, and someone standing next to you will say that's not actually happening, what you just saw, and you can pick up your smartphone and check the news article and realize that the site of violence is being written in a completely different way from the way that you're seeing it. And you realize, well, that's written down, so that's going to go into the historical record, and that I saw it's going to disappear. And then you start to think, well, did I really see that? I'm not sure I understood what I saw. So you have an incredibly visceral understanding of the way that these historical narratives that we can talk about in a very clinical sense are actually created around you at all times. And at the same time that you're experiencing that, the limits of the sayable or the seeable are getting tinier and tinier. And I just wanted to show this funny image because many things are illegal now. Many words are illegal and certain numbers are illegal. So we can't say the number 4 anymore. So people start to come up with many, many funny logos to represent the number 4. I always thought it was a very sweet number, but it has very malevolent intentions, apparently. Actually, black and yellow is also now illegal. To make this gesture is illegal. So there are many things that we can't see, we can't say, we can't do. And as cultural workers, we do feel a strong responsibility somehow to be guardians of history or guardians of freedom of speech. And so we feel that we have to combat our archival chronic fatigue syndrome and try to document and to preserve certain things. And one thing that we've been concerned about at Townhouse, which is my institution in Cairo, it's a non-collecting, non-profit contemporary art space, but for some years we've been very concerned about trying to help facilitate the writing of Egyptian art history, of modernist art history and contemporary art history, which is very underwritten and underdocumented, you could say. And so in the context of this extreme political urgency of matter of record and so on, we recently decided this year to relaunch and reformat the program that we had started to propose in 2010 and was put on hold after the revolution, which is we're calling it, this is not the official title, but for now the Comparative Memory Project, which will have many different aspects. But one of the aspects is to think about archiving, not only in terms of content, of trying to archive these subliminal memories, as others have talked about, or these kinds of forbidden gestures or so on, but also to play with the archival methods as well. And I'm not quite clever enough to think of a whole new methodology, but hopefully someone else will be. But in the meantime, to get started, we're working with a small group of artists and writers to think of different playful things that we could do. So one of the proposals that we are talking about is if we think of the act of archiving as a violent act that's very exclusionary and cutting things out, instead of trying to counteract that, to create a comprehensive archive, to also be violent actors and decide site what we would like to exclude within Townhouse from our archive of modern and contemporary art history. So we will generate a list of words to ban from our art history as well, a list of events and artists that we think should be completely forgotten. Maybe we can decide to ban all paintings with the color yellow. I'm not sure, it will be up to the participants in the project. And then also given the fact that the way that Egyptian art history has been written so far, it tends to have dominant narrative of failure and a lot of focus on lack. Certain things didn't happen, certain movements never came to Egypt. So we decided to embrace those lacks as well and give the participants the task of inventing some of those things that supposedly never happened. For example, one of the projects was, it's been mentioned quite a bit that there was never really performance art in Egypt. So we asked the participants to invent a imaginary group of performance artists. We will hire actors to do their work, to reenact them. And if they want to steal other ideas from the iconic artists, that's fine. And then we'll write many nice critiques so that this can formally enter the history, and then that solves that problem. And also, toward the end of very clearly acknowledging the subjectivity of history writing, another performative event will be to invite different artists or players from the scene to engage in a town hall style debate in public, each one giving his memory of the last 10 years, his or her memory of the last 10 years, of the key exhibitions and artists and so on. Much of this is not documented, and some of these artists have died and their work is lost in legal battles and so on. So a lot of this contemporary moment is living in people's minds. So they can debate each other's memories, and then we'll all vote collectively on which one we feel the most affinity with, and that will be the index for the art history that we can write. So this is sort of long introduction to the term that I proposed today to discuss, which is the pathological fracture. And I brought that up because I was interested in using a medical language or language of pathology as one of the exercises in art historical writing as part of this project. And this is coming from a desire to profoundly engage with our subjectivity, again, working in Cairo with our personal experiences. We are all very depressed. There's some nervous breakdown. There's a lot of sadness, and that is going to be coloring anything that we do or any project that we do. So if we're all sharing this moment of clinical psychosis, then we can use this language to write our histories and see if that makes any difference. And what I was interested in was the idea. If we talk about pathology as something that's long-lasting and persisting, it doesn't make for the best kind of storytelling. It's much more interesting to hear the story of a terrible wound with a beautiful recovery that's very optimistic, or a terrible wound that then results in tragic death. But no one wants to listen to their grandfather talk, for hours and hours every single day about how his knees are bad and they've been bad for 20 years. So since it doesn't make for such a compelling story, then maybe we're missing some details. But I think there have been many small breaks and small wounds and small illnesses that have persisted for a long time and continue to persist, and are maybe being genetically expressed in the new generation somehow, if we can think of culture as something with a genome. I thought of a few examples that I don't know if it changes anything to use this language of pathology if you're just trying to describe a history, but you can think of one very serious wound was inflicted on the region when the US invaded Iraq. And that wound has festered and become infected. In Egypt, we don't talk about it really anymore at all because so many other things have happened, so we've sort of forgotten it. But one interesting manifestation of that wound, or the effect of that infection, is that the man, the family who ran the bronze foundry in Baghdad that created all of the great art sculptures of Saddam Hussein and the ruling family. Well, after the US invaded Iraq, they obviously had to flee, and they wound up around 2006 in Cairo and started the first publicly accessible bronze foundry in Cairo ever. All the other ones are sort of run by the army. And starting in 2007, 2008, you have all of these young artists who are starting to make these small-scale bronze works really for the first time. So because of this wound, we now have a strange rash of bronze work that's spreading around Egypt. So that's sort of an interesting causality or an interesting epidemiology, I guess.
Do you have any images of those?
I don't. I'm actually not on my computer, so my computer broke with all of my images on it. I can email them to you someday, I hope.
Sounds very interesting.
Yeah, sure. Another funny example, you could say, would be of the arts education system in Egypt, the national arts education system, which is often, has always been described with this kind of language as a very sick, a very diseased, infected with osteoporosis. It's this big infrastructure that's rotten from the inside. And a lot of the blame is placed on Sadat and Mubarak for failing to invest in higher education and so on. But it's sort of interesting if you look at the values that are inculcated within the arts education system. It's still the product of the Nasser times. And the sort of state line under Nasser, he made the universities free in 1962 and promised anyone who graduated with a public sector job and so on. And the arts curriculums that are still in place today were developed in the 50s and 60s. And they see these curriculums describe art as something that can be taught. It's very skills-based. It's something that anyone can learn. And it's something that should have a social usefulness. It should beautify. It should teach. You can take it to the rural areas to help be literate and so on. But what's interesting, the Nasser regime is credited with coming up with that value system. But in fact, if you want to keep looking for causality and do this epidemiological kind of study, in the 1790s, during the French occupation of Egypt, the roots of the modern education system were born because the French introduced this system of exams to enter the military academy, which was then expounded on by Muhammad Ali Pasha and then the British occupation and resisted under Nasser. So to get into university in the final year of high school, you take an exam, and based on that score you get placed into a faculty. So the people who are in the arts faculty don't necessarily want to study arts. Many of them wanted to study architecture, engineering, or computer science, but they got the score that puts them into the art faculty. And so from the very beginning, if you look at it from that direction, art is always something that's going to be taught. It's not something that you study because you're a genius or because you love it or you want to express yourself, but it's a series of skills. That has its roots not in Nasser, but more than a century earlier. So just two very art historical examples, but I guess the last point I wanted to make was one pathology that we are witnessing now that I would like to study as we go through this writing exercise with the participants at Townhouse, as the pathology of malingering and laziness and procrastination that many of the young artists are seen as being afflicted with in the present moment. There is a very interesting group of artists who are recent graduates who were in the big annual government show, which is called the Youth Salon, which is the show, it's sort of the big national BFA and the FA show all combined into one thing. These artists showed in the 2009 version, and there was a lot of interest about them, and also from foreign curators and so on. And then in the following years, they all kind of disappeared, and they're sort of rebuked with being very lazy, not caring. But their withdrawal is very extreme. They left the country, or they erased their online presence, their Facebook, their Gmail, changed their phone numbers, moved to Sharm el-Sheikh, working in accounting. They moved back with their parents and won't answer anyone's calls anymore. Or a few of them committed suicide, which is the most extreme possibly make. So it's sort of a strange affliction of this whole sort of generation that a lot of hopes have been put on, have decided to malinger somehow. So I'm interested in finding the epidemiological roots of this illness. And then I just wanted to end by showing you some funny images, some ones that I did find in my computer.
You're sure it's a pathology? It's not a...
No, I'm not sure at all. I just like to use this word. Because I'm using it in this case to describe this group of artists specifically because of the language that has been used to ask what's going on with these kids. Like what's...
But of course, when someone withdraws from the attention economy, it's automatically thought to be weird rather than positive.
Yeah, of course. And it's also a strange timing because this started to happen right before the revolution. But since the revolution happened, that action has become automatically politicized as well because it's a withdrawal from engagement or an abdication of the political or so on. But it's, I mean, the word nonetheless that always comes up is lazy. So I like thinking of lazy as lazy can be a very political position, but it can also be an illness.
There is this writing by Ania Szremski, which that probably most of you know, in praise of laziness. It's very important text. The 19th century.
Yeah, I mean, it's this kind of Bartleby, and I prefer not to. That can have a lot of power. But it's, I would say, locally within Cairo, within the cultural players, we're not really looking at the power of that position, but pathologizing it exactly as saying that there's something wrong with it. I just wanted to show these funny images by Al-Ghazar, who's, for anyone who's known something about Egyptian art history, he's the most famous artist of the 20th century. He became very famous under Nasser. He's considered to be kind of the state painter of the revolution of the officer school of 52. He had been sort of persecuted under King Farouk because he was doing these social realist paintings that showed sort of the plight of the poor and so on. And so the Nasser regime, of course, took him up with open arms. And he was commissioned to do sort of large-scale history paintings of the triumphs of the Nasser regime, commemorating the Suez Canal and so on. And he was invited with a group of many others to visit the construction of Haidam of Aswan in 1963. And he made a lot of nice oil paintings and so on for the state. But then at the same time, these are very small Indian ink drawings that he did just for himself. Unfortunately, I don't have the best drawings with me because I only have a computer. But they're these sort of very, these are the most extreme ones, but you can see, I mean, sort of very scared, paranoid visions of these strange, distressed bodies that reveal basically an extreme anxiety about Nasser's modernist project. And if you sort of look at the genealogy of the drawings, they come right out of the sketches he was doing at the Aswan Dam, when he got very scared of scaffolding and so on, these huge machines. And he also started writing at the same time that he did these, some of the first science fiction stories that were written in Egyptian Arabic. And most of these drawings, they haven't been written about much in the body of scholarship that's on Ghazar, because they don't fit within the narrative of him glorifying the Nasser regime. But when they have been mentioned, they've been, because he died shortly after he did these very painfully, rheumatoid arthritis of the heart. And I'm done. Oh, it's a good story, so, but it's the last one. So the art historians were saying that he had a premonition of his own death, and he was very in pain, and that's why he made these kind of sad and scared drawings.